Going okay. Hey, we're live. So good morning, Lance Turchioni and Adam Henniger here with you on Ask the Agronomist this morning. We're starting about a minute early, and we'll see how long we go here today. If this episode ends up being a little short, I know you're all busy and you won't be disappointed in that. Before I forget to do this, because I do forget things seemingly more every day. They say old people can remember the past. They just can't remember yesterday. I seemingly can't remember either one some days. So I don't know what that says about me. But Jennifer Elliott wanted me and Adam to remind everybody that, or let everybody know that at noon today, it's like a movie premiere. There's a new video commercial for Yield Chasers that's going to drop here on our YouTube channel. So Jennifer's kind of big time, and so she's got some cool stuff going on here around Yield Chasers. And at noon today, if you're in the house eating a little bit of lunch and you log back onto the YouTube channel here, or I know some of you are not watching live, you're going to watch this later, so you might be watching this at close to noon today. I think there's some sort of fancy schmancy commercial that Jennifer has created for Yield Chasers that's going to be here on the YouTube channel at noon. So our Yield Chaser program, again, is our celebration of yield. And if you've already started your harvest, or you've been at the coffee shop talking to other people who have started their harvest, you might have a little bit of a clue that this is a good year to celebrate yields. So this crop, we're very early in the harvest. I'm glad I got Adam here with me today, because he's the only guy in the room that's got enough harvest done to know much. But I have never seen this many plot yields over 300 bushel. I've never seen these kind of farm yield averages that we've been seeing. And this is shaping up to be one of those kind of first liar doesn't have a chance kind of harvest years. So if you're going into the coffee shop, you're going into the cafe, you're going into the elevator with the intention of bragging about something, my suggestion would be to aim high before you say anything, because the yields have been crazy. And for those of you who were hoping, if your marketing plan involved some sort of big post-harvest correction to the yields that were nowhere, no way they were going to be as good as the government says, I might have some bad news for you there. So I'm not sure where the corn is in Illinois that's going to drag the state average down to 227. But it's been good. Soybeans have been good. So if you've started your harvest, hopefully that's what you're seeing. We'll spend some time here this morning talking about the not so good side of things. I mean, we tend to, sometimes people tell me I'm kind of negative, and I guess when you're an agronomist for a living, you talk about problems, and nobody ever calls you to say, hey, this was just amazing. Why is it so good? So we do tend to focus more on the challenges we're having. The challenge we're going to have this year is the bad stuff's not really bad. It's just going to feel bad relative to how awesome some things are. So, I think certainly about the only thing that's been harvested at this point has been early planted, earlier stuff. So we haven't gotten into our later planted crop yet. We haven't gotten into our full season stuff yet in some cases. The late planted full season corn actually is not even black layered yet, and it needed rain badly about 2-3 weeks ago. Our full season later planted beans needed rain badly 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I'm a little nervous that some of the you'd kind of like to not start with the absolute best crop you've got and then steadily decline through the rest of harvest, just because that's a little frustrating. And it kind of happens that way sometimes anyway, because as things get drier and we are less, you're more timely with your harvest earlier in the season, and timely harvested crops always yield the best. The first time you can cut a field of beans is going to be the best yield. If they've been harvestable, 4 times before you get to them, wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry. So far this fall, we haven't had, we've had wet, drier, and it's never rained. So those beans haven't gotten, moistened back up. And Adam told me this morning, he talked to a guy that was delivering some beans to the elevator yesterday, had a couple loads under 9%. So that's frustrating. And a lot of you, if you're cutting beans, they're probably a little tough. You probably got some green stems. You probably got lots of green leaves. You probably got some green pods, but the grain is ridiculously dry. And that's a real challenge with beans. I mean, when you've got weather like we've had here lately, the pod and the grain can dry so much faster than the rest of the plant can. Unless the rest of the plant died of a disease or it was unhealthy, the rest of the plant probably still got some life in it. But the grain itself is really too dry to be harvesting. And we're reaching that point where, frankly, I know this is, everybody has a different opinion. I know my grandfather was hey, when it's good bean cutting weather, you cut beans, and he would not have appreciated my suggestion that maybe we quit cutting beans because they're too dry and let's go get some corn out. There's a lot of you out there that virtually every acre you've got could be harvested now. And especially in Adam's territory where there was a lot more early planting now. And as you get north in my territory, planting was strung out over 6 weeks plus. And so we've got corn that is 16% in the field, and we've got corn that hasn't black layered yet. Adam's got a lot more of the 16% in the field stuff than he does the not black layered yet stuff. So if you've got a really spread out planting date, that will help you be timely with your harvest. But if you got everything, socked in pretty timely, probably every acre you've got could be harvested right now. And some of you may be feeling a little bit of pressure that crop might look like it needs harvested right now. And I would have to say that, stock quality is not bad. The disease pressure has been a little bit lower than normal this year, but you always have stalk issues at some point. And when you've got 285 bushel of yield hanging on that plant, even that April corn that's only about yay tall, that's still putting, still a lot of weight to hold up, and you're still always one storm away from, something you don't want to be looking at. So, timeliness is important. The May corn that's still green, that's about 3 foot taller than the April corn, seemingly every time the wind blew in my territory this year, the May corn took it worse than the April corn did. We had more green snap in May corn. We've had more late season stalk lodging in the May corn. The May corn, the stalk diameter is about 50% less than the April corn is. I mean, it's just a taller, more gangly, a little bit more spindly stalk because it was just growing so fast versus that April corn that was really, really struggling to grow early on. And that's why it's that reduced height and stature. People are starting to realize that height of corn doesn't really correlate to yield, because it might be the shortest corn crop you've ever harvested, but it's also going to be the best corn crop you've ever harvested for lots of people. So we're really doing a good job this year demonstrating that height and yield in corn, are correlate about as much as test weight and yield do, which is 0. Just for those of you out there that aren't sure about that. If you've been out and you're happy with your yields, you're not alone. If you've been out and you've been disappointed in your yields, there's some things that we're seeing out there. We're seeing a huge difference to fungicide. So even though we had low disease pressure this year, which we did, there's tar spot out there, there's crown rot out there, there's crap out there, there's always crap out there. Fungus grows on your corn every year. It's going to happen. So we've got some disease, but we've also had stress. We've also had tremendously high yield potential. And anything you do to keep that plant healthier, make that plant feel better, alleviate a little bit of stress, is going to translate to more yield potential. And we've been given a year by Mother Nature where there's a lot of potential yield. And personally, I think that makes it easier to get your bang for your buck out of your fungicide. So I won't ask for a show of hands, but I know some of you out there listening, got a little chintzy this year because commodity prices were down and it was going to cost a lot of money to put a fungicide on, and you couldn't find any disease, and you let somebody talk you out of putting a fungicide on, or maybe you talked yourself out of putting a fungicide on. Adam's had fields where guys have done checks on second applications in corn. So that's the other end of the spectrum. There were some people, believe it or not, that even though their corn never looked like it needed sprayed, they sprayed it twice. And he had a guy yesterday that with a late application of fungicide in corn, probably like what, an R3, R4, Adam. So not like too late to have a benefit, but the optimal timing for that second post-tassel app, if you want to be uber aggressive on corn fungicide, he added about 15 bushel to his corn crop. And that's probably on top of the 15 or 20 bushel he added from his VT application. So if you did not put fungicide on your corn, I would not be shocked if it's yielding 30 or 40 bushel less in some cases than corn that did get fungicide. Now, it's not always going to be that big a difference, but those size of differences are out there. Same thing with soybeans. I was talking to a guy the other day that he tried for the first time this year. He tried 2 applications of fungicide in soybeans, and he was running a 96 bushel field average on a 2.6 soybean, with about 20 acres of an 80 left to harvest. So best beans he'd ever seen, seeing the yield monitor over 100, frequently going through the field. And he left some check strips from his second fungicide application in soybeans, and he felt he was getting a six bushel bump from that second app in beans. So I think we're going to see a pretty big fungicide response this year, partly because of the yields that we're at. I've always believed that yield increases happen on a percentage basis. And, if you follow along with the math here, would you rather have a 10% bump of 300 or a 10% bump of 150? I kind of think that's the way you need to think about fungicides. And that's also why I've always felt better about trying to make a good crop better with fungicides rather than resurrecting a bad one. Sometimes we have to try to, throw some Hail Marys and save some stuff late. But, with fungicides, I think you're always better off to be proactive and to be preventative. And if you're spraying fungicide, and it's kind of like spraying herbicides on weeds these days, we talk about going earlier, using residuals to prevent weeds from emerging. If you're driving through that bean field spraying, going, oh crap, I should have been out here a couple of weeks ago, that's not a good place to be. And if you're spraying brown silk corn with fungicide, going, oh, I wish I'd have got this done 10 days ago. Yeah, me too. It's earlier is better. Now you can be too early with fungicides and get yourself in a situation where they can kind of work against you a little bit. So you can't go overboard with the earliness, but timeliness is important. I was talking to a producer the other day that's they farm a lot of acres. They bought a couple drones and they're trying to do all their own application on their own farm. I'm not opposed to drone applications, but if you're trying to spray 5,000 acres yourself with a couple drones, I hope your planting date was spread out over about 6 weeks to give yourself the time to get all that done. Because the one drawback with drones to me is they're slow. It's going to take some time for you to cover those acres. And if by the time you get those acres covered, you're 2 weeks too late on the last stuff you do, you're not helping yourself by saving the application money that somebody else isn't charging you on those applications. So I think there's a lot of things we've learned with fungicide that are important. The fungicide you use is important. They're not all the same. I do think you get what you pay for in fungicides. And if you're not using the best products on the market, you shouldn't expect to get the best results on the market. I think rate really matters a lot. Coverage matters some. Timing matters a lot. And so there are things that are important about those fungicide applications. We got a question come in?
Yeah,
awesome.
When you're talking about timing, it's perfect timing for this question.
All right.
Ross Dallenbacher, I'm sure you remember Ross.
I do. Hi, Ross.
He says, are you seeing any difference between V12 plus VT apps versus VT and R3 combination?
I haven't had a chance to evaluate that yet, Ross, personally. I think, and I know Cal and I have talked about this, and we're kind of in a similar spot. There's nothing wrong with a VT or V12 application. That's not a stage that I'm worried about damaging the plant. The challenge with that is it locks you into that second application. And I'm not sure in every year it would prevent the need for a third application. So the danger to me of going too early is I don't care what product you use, they've got 2 to 3 weeks residual at most. So my concern with some of that early stuff looked good when we didn't have a disease that can infect your corn in August. Now that we've got a disease that can ruin your corn crop in August, I think that V12 stuff is a little dicey. So personally, I would rather wait till tassel time, and then if I have to make another application after that, I can get to that R3, R4 stage before I have to spray it. If you start with V12 on the first one and you need the R3, R4, you can't wait from V12 to R3, R4 because that's too much gap in between. So I have some concerns with the logistics around those early vegetative applications and how successful they're going to be giving season-long protection. That doesn't mean that they won't be great sometimes. That doesn't mean that they won't work sometimes. But if I was going to pick on it, that's what I would pick on it for. That being said, I've done no testing on that. I don't think we've even got that trial out there anywhere. We're not a big promoter of the V12, so we're not doing a lot of work to show whether it works or not. The bulk of the fungicide data that has been generated over the years by every major manufacturer of fungicides has shown, and all the academic work that's been done has shown that VT to R1 timing is kind of the sweet spot. That's when you're going to get the maximum odds of success from that application. And I think generally, there could be a year out there that's a little bit of an exception, but I think generally we will always be able to wait to, I shouldn't say generally and always in the same sentence. That's a little bit of an oxymoron, but very high percentage of the time we can wait till tassel to put our fungicide on and be okay. I got too many people trying to wait till brown silk. That drives me crazy. That drives me almost as crazy as people that think test weight has something to do with yield. That is too late to put fungicide on corn. Doesn't mean you can't get a benefit out of it, but you missed out on a better benefit if you would have gotten it on earlier. There's a lot of data to support that. The people that are promoting brown silk applications don't have any data that says brown silk is better than VT to R1. It's just marketing. It makes sense to people. Well, I don't see any disease on my corn, so why would I spray my fungicide? Well, I'll tell you why. Because when you can see disease on your corn, it's too late to spray your fungicide. So you gotta use them preventatively. Even if you're using a strong, we've got the strongest curative product on the market with Delaro. There's a lot of curative in there. That's one of the benefits of Delaro and Delaro Complete is the high rate of triazole chemistry. The triazole is the curative piece. Arguably, we've got the most curative product on the market, and we're not telling you to wait to spray your fungicide. We're telling you to spray it early, or we'll say timely. Some of you would say we're saying it, it's telling you too early, but to me, early and timely are the same thing. So thoughts, Adam?
I don't even like the term curative, to be honest with you, because
right.
when you think about curing something, it's like the lesion that the disease has already caused is going to go away, and that's not the way that works. Right. That's I joke about the third category that nobody's invented yet. That would be when resurrective fungicides are available. Right. That's when, and Adam's right. The word curative in your mind, you're thinking resurrective. Yes,
not the same. Right. The difference between preventative and curative is hours in the course of the infection. It's not days, and it's sure as hell not weeks. So the difference between a preventative and a curative is a lot less than I think people perceive it to be. And I've even heard some chemistry salespeople market, well, we got a really strong curative, so we're gonna wait a little later into the growing season. I've even heard some Bayer people that I don't agree with that have promoted it that way. I don't think that's like waiting till all your weeds are up to go spray. Bad idea. So I can't answer your question directly, Ross. Adams, I would say from what we've seen so far, both of those programs will show a very positive benefit. Which one will be more or less, I don't know. I think the guys that went ahead and tried some second apps in corn could possibly like what they see. Early indications are just from a few side-by-sides and plots that Adam and I have talked about. We're seeing good responses to multiple applications of fungicide this year. And this is not, I'd say from Adams territory south, this probably is the worst tar spot those guys have ever seen. Adams had a few pockets where tar spot got pretty bad. You guys had more tar spot than I did. You go to Monmouth, even in unsprayed corn at Monmouth, there's not enough tar spot to hurt yield. You go south in Illinois. I got a good friend of mine that farms in the Greenfield area, and they've got the worst tar spot they've ever seen. Now it's not bad by northern Illinois. You know, everybody that every year you have the worst tar spot you've ever seen, everybody thinks they've got bad tar spot. The guys in Greene County, Illinois, don't really know what bad tar spot is. You know, just because it's the worst they've seen. You talk to my friend Jim Donnelly that works in northern Illinois and Wisconsin. Jim can tell you about bad tar spot. You know, and when you see corn that literally dies mid-dent with nothing else but tar spot wrong with it, that's bad tar spot.
And back to Ross's original question, I completely agree, and I'm of the recommendation stance myself that the VTR3 approach is the best approach, the most data supported approach there is.
Right.
We've also had a couple of years, the last 2 years, we've had much rain in June. And
Right.
I know what rain in June does for tar spot.
Right.
So I wonder
Right.
if we do get a year where we get more rain in June and knowing what we know about tar spot currently, if maybe trying to help keep tar spot at bay a little bit better in a wet June year, maybe that B12 application might make more of a difference than it typically would. I don't know.
It could. I have a little bit of a concern that the best growth stage timing to prevent early tar spot might be in the no man's land growth stages where I don't really want to be recommending fungicide either. Because I think V12 might be a little early, you know, and you get much past that, then you're starting to make me nervous about weird crap that happens. So
I agree, but
yeah,
the only caveat potentially like I think to that would be that.
And Adam's exactly right. You know, the last 2 years have pretty well, actually the last 3 years have pretty well proven that the nemesis of tar spot is not fungicide, is not genetics, is not, you know, we would like to say that we can control it with genetics. We'd like to say we can control it with fungicide, but Mother Nature controls it a lot better than we do if it's dry in June. And the parts of the state that have the worst tar spot had the wettest June. It correlates amazingly close. If you caught an extra half inch of rain at the right time in June, you've got more tar spot than somebody who didn't get that rain in June. So the last 3 years have kind of shown us that, you know, the first year that you've had 6 or 8 inches of rain in June and you've had lots of cloudy days and you planted early and your corn looks like $1 million, but you've had a wet June, that will be the year to be loaded for bear against tar spot. And that's the kind of weather that we had in 21. Combined with, and I like to continue to remind people, 21 was not just tar spot. 21 was not even primarily tar spot. Now, I think tar spot coming in late made the crown rot worse, and we had a lot of southern rust that was making the crown rot worse. So, you know, there were 3 major important diseases that made the 100 bushel yield swings that we saw in 21. Tar spot got all the glory. Tar spot got all the talk. Tar spot got all the credit. Everybody got spun up about tar spot. I don't think tar spot was the primary disease that was wrong with corn in 2021. So appreciate the question, Ross. We wasted a lot of time there not actually answering your question, but I really appreciate it, and it helps generate conversation, which is what we're trying to do here. Okay, so I had a little bit of a list up here. So let's talk about harvestability a little bit. So if you've had any wind, which I don't know if there's anybody left in the state of Illinois that hasn't had some wind this year. I swear parts of my territory have had wind events about every 3 weeks through the whole growing season. We had green snap and knee-high corn. We had green snap and chest-high corn. We had green snap and tasseled corn. And we even had an event 3 weeks ago that people are calling green snap. I don't really consider that to be green snap. That's just kind of a little bit weakened stalk with some cannibalization going on, breaking over, you know, and it's still hooked on. The plant's still connected to its root system. The ear that's laying on the ground in some cases is still actually accumulating some dry matter. It's going to reach a semi-normal black layer. And assuming you slow down a little bit, and assuming you get your snouts on the ground, and assuming that the stalk doesn't break off when you go to bring it into the head, I think you'll even get most of that yield. But there's some fields that got roughed up pretty bad about 3 weeks ago. Again, primarily in the May planted corn. So this year, Chris Carlisle is grinning from ear to ear every time something bad happens in May planted corn. And my credibility is taking a major hit about, every time something happens in May planted corn. And I don't know what's going to be left of my beloved May planted corn before the end of the year, but the April corn is probably going to kick its ass in some cases. And I'm going to have a big ass mountain full plate of crow to eat with some of you guys, because, Adam's got April planted corn that should have died 8 weeks ago with crown rot that's making 310. And my poor May corn with some green snap and some aphids and late drought is going to come in about 230. And they're going to go, what the hell's so special about May corn? So this has been a really rough summer on a guy that likes to talk about the fact that, hey, we don't have to sock all this corn in April 5th to be good corn farmers, because you guys that socked it all in early, that's some awful good corn. So well done, and those of us that try to stick up for people who like to be a little more patient, we will live to fight another day. So anyway,
for the record, I don't think it's all the May corn. Even I think it's a little bit more geographically detrimental than it is planting date detrimental. Based on the environment. I think I've got some May corn in my territory that I think is actually.
All right, so Adam's being kind to me here today, throwing me a little bit of a lifeline. So
the only thing it missed out is another rain. The last rain we had was basically the beginning of August. There was a spot or two that got a little bitty shower, but
it's. I was looking at my brother-in-law's got he planted some early wheat this year, which we got out pretty timely, and we had the bean planter sitting on the edge of the field as soon as they got the straw off. And we got double crop beans planted, I don't know, 26, 27, 28th of June, something like that, and got a rain on them right after, and they took off, and they are gorgeous. They're waist high 39 XF3s that, are aborting pods left and right now because it hasn't rained for a month. But my goodness, those things were going to be good. I think they'll still be. They'll probably still make 50 bushel, but I think they could have been 60 or 70 if they'd have got some rain. So kind of, and I'm seeing if you've got May planted corn, especially, like the Mother's Day stuff is probably black layered in most cases, but those of us that truly planted a lot of corn in May, we've got a lot of May 18th to 22nd corn in a lot of my territory. And that stuff is not black layered yet. Now the stressy parts of the field are dead. Where it died a little bit early, and you're going to have shallower kernels there, and the kernel depth on this good corn is just freakishly amazing. If you want to do something fun, take a nice ear of corn, count the kernels on it, shell that grain off, and weigh it, and then you can calculate what the actual kernels per bushel are on that ear, or to make the number of kernels required to make 56 pounds of grain is what I'm trying to get to. And so you can back calculate what would have been the actual accurate, correct factor to use for that ear of corn. Now, it doesn't represent every ear of corn in the field. It's still just an estimate, but that would be a fun exercise to do, because I guarantee you a lot of this 300 bushel corn, the right factor is probably about 60,000 kernels to make 56 pounds of grain. And that's why, your yield checks were not coming back at 300. You were at 240, 250, 260, and then it makes 280, 290, 300. You're like, where the hell did all that come from? Well, you were probably using an 80,000 factor. Maybe some of you were a little, bold and dipped down to maybe a 75,000 factor, but I bet none of you use 60. And there's probably some situations out there where some of these big, deep kerneled hybrids, not high test weight hybrids necessarily, but big, deep kerneled hybrids with heavy kernels, that, it's not taking very many of those kernels to make a bushel of corn. And there'll be some bad lessons learned this year, Adam. some of you guys, you'll start using 60 from now on for your factor.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Stay with the 80, 85. I don't think, 90 is probably overly conservative. It's unless your corn dies really early because of some disease or we're going through some catastrophic drought. I think, I don't know if 90 was ever the right number or not. I think it was probably always conservative. That's the way we'd like to be. How many of you want to tell your landlord your corn's 280 and then it turns out to be 240? I don't want to do that either. So let's tell them it's 240 and then they're pleasantly surprised when it's 275. So I think 90,000 was probably always set to be kind of conservative. So we're not overestimating every yield check that we do. But if you truly want to get, hell, you can set in your house and guess it closer than you can get it on a yield check sometimes. So, but if you truly want to be, I know one producer that he actually, when he does his yield checks, he actually does that. He shells the grain off of the ears he harvests. He weighs that grain, adjusts it for moisture, and then back calculates what his factor should be. Now, I think that's probably going a little above and beyond, but that's what he likes to do, and it's interesting. And he had one, and I'm gonna give this guy credit for, kind of foreshadowing what was coming. He had one that 62.5 was the right factor for one of his yield check years.
Yeah.
And with the yields we're achieving, I think there's probably quite a few acres out there that's probably pretty close to right.
That's definitely a more legitimate and accurate way to do it.
Right.
You're definitely making way less assumptions. But the thing you can't ever forget is spatial variability, and you can't do yield checks in enough places and know how big those places and areas are.
I was joking. I was joking with one of our good customers that sometimes watches this program. He was using a competitor's app to calculate yield off of his yield checks, and it gave you 3 levels. It gave you tough grain fill conditions. That's not good. We're getting kind of sketchy there, so hopefully this doesn't crash. Anyway, so it gave you 3 different levels. It gave you poor grain fill conditions, average grain fill conditions, or good grain fill conditions, and it gave you 3 different yield levels based on those 3 different grain fill conditions. And it was actually giving good information because the yield difference between poor, average, and good was a ridiculous 80 bushel. Spread, and that's real, and that's all because of kernel size, and it's all because of grain fill conditions. And so basically this app told him that his corn was going to yield somewhere between 240 and 320 something. I'm like, well, hell, you could have got that close sitting in your living room. And he laughs, says, well, that's where I'm at right now. So, but he was playing with the app to get those yield projection numbers. So anyway, back on harvestability issues. We've got some down corn. I am concerned. I'm always concerned this time of year, not to be an alarmist or a pessimist. I've been accused of being an alarmist on aphids. I've been accused of being an alarmist on weeds. I was alarmist on stink bugs this year, which may have actually I may have actually grown some aphids on my farm. I'll tell you the story here in a bit. But at this time of year, I'm always worried about corn going down. And, when you've got the crop that's out there, I know nobody wants to spend extra money on drying. I know nobody's got any extra room in their budget, but man, I'd hate to see 280 bushel corn laying on the ground. And my guess is we'll see some of that before the harvest is over. And I have a fear that this harvest is going to take a long time. We're going to run into lines at the elevator. Let's hope that nothing bad happens with the barge traffic on the river, and we need to get some water in the river to keep things moving. I could just, and I'm always I'm always game plan worst case scenarios. That's something I talk to my therapist about that I need to quit doing. So it's I can see all these horrible things happening. I could see harvest getting slow. I can see harvest getting bogged down. I can see windstorms coming through. I can see down corn. I don't want to see any of that. So rather than cut 9% beans, I'd be picking your 16% corn, honestly. And if you haven't picked much corn yet, it's probably drier than you think it is. Now the late May corn is not. I had a friend of mine doing some hand shell moisture checks in his May corn the other day, and it was 35. I mean, it wasn't quite black layered yet. So the May corn is a different story, unless it has died in a field due to stress. It's got a lot of moisture left in it. So if you got a lot of May corn, you got time on that. And our operation is set up kind of nice. Now we haven't got started yet because we're slow. So that's the other thing that's bugging me is I'm worried about our lack of progress getting started on harvest. We've only got one field of April corn, which I'm hoping to get that out here in the next few days, and then get on beans for a while, and then cut a bunch of beans, and then get a bunch of corn out, and probably finish corn, and then end on beans maybe. But I've been that guy trying to cut beans in November before, and that sucks being that guy. So I don't know how many times we're going to switch the combine from one crop to the next this year, but it's going to be more often than I would like. And my brother-in-law's got those 3 9s planted in late June, double crop beans that's going to be the last thing we do. So I'm probably going to finish on beans no matter what I do. But the logistics of harvest, if you know how to manage harvest logistics, give me a call, and I could probably benefit from your wisdom, because I feel like we're going to put way too many miles on a combine this fall, and we're going to take the heads on and off way more often than I would like to. But I can't really figure out any other way to do it and be kind of sort of timely on my harvest. But I talked about aphids there a minute. So one thing that I've picked up on, and I kind of noticed this first on my own farm, and I'd like you all to watch for this too. Did anybody use insecticide post in corn with their herbicide post pass? So some of us were recommending that because we were worried about stink bugs. If you can remember way back to early in the season, that was the first insect issue we dealt with was weevils and alfalfa. And then it was kind of cutworms, and then it was stink bugs in corn. And we had a lot of stink bug damage. And I saw enough stink bug damage that my corn that I had not posted yet, I went ahead and ran an insecticide with that herbicide pass, hoping to prevent some stink bug damage. And I've got some ears that I marked in a field at Monmouth of plants. So I marked plants early in the season that had stink bug damage with a stake. And then I took pictures of those plants through the growing season. Last week, I harvested the ears off those plants. I haven't weighed the grain yet, but I'm going to hand shell each of those ears. And I've got some ears from the same field that were not damaged by stink bug. It's going to scare you how much yield each individual stink bug plant lost. Now, I marked varying degrees of damage. I marked some really messed up ones that basically had no ear. And I marked some that had very minor damage that have essentially a full ear. So it is exactly the way you would expect it to be. But those plants that look really bad from stink bug damage, they produce no yield. So if you had, and I was in fields where 10% of the plants look like that. So that's like, worse than you never planting that 10% of those plants. So I was pretty motivated to protect corn from stink bug. And ironically, I'm now starting to fear that I might have actually made my aphid problem worse by spraying an insecticide the middle of June, because this was May planted corn. So this was May 18th to 22nd planted corn, which we were posting probably the middle of June when the corn was, yay tall. And that's just about the time that the aphids came on the scene. And now I'm wondering, did I kill off a bunch of beneficial insects that would have been, kind of feeding on those aphids to prevent them from getting started? Because every field of corn I've got at home that was planted in May, now my April planted corn didn't get the insecticide with the post trip because we hadn't noticed the stink bug issues yet at that time. But the April planted corn, generally, it was like the Passover. The aphids just passed over the April planted corn and went into the later corn. The less mature corn was more attractive to them for whatever reason. So it's really not a good test. I mean, I've got no aphids in my April planted corn that didn't get insecticide, but I don't think I would have had aphids in that corn anyway. So that's not really a good trial. But every field of corn I've got at home that I used insecticide on early post seems to have more aphids in it than a lot of your fields that I walk into, regardless of what hybrid it is. There's a lot of chatter about, oh, this hybrid's got aphids and this hybrid doesn't. This one's really bad and this one's not so bad. it doesn't matter what hybrid I've got. There's aphids in all of them. And now I'm starting to wonder, was I just in the right spot that I've got more aphid pressure, or did I inadvertently make it worse by doing that insecticide pass? So if anybody have been doing, you did some fields with that early insecticide and some you didn't, keep an eye on your aphid damage in your May corn. And if you think you're seeing more aphid damage in fields that you did use insecticide in post with your herbicide, let me know that, because it's very unscientific. I just got this idea in my head now and I can't get it out of my head. I wish I had some trials to put my mind at ease or to prove my fears, but I don't. And I know you don't either. But if 15 of us happen to have observations that are similar, it kind of starts to get real. So if you do have that comparison on your farm and you think you see a difference, or if you think you don't see a difference, I'd like to know. And that's one thing that entomologists have always cautioned us on, is you do not want to use insecticide in a field if there are aphids there, because the aphid population is going to explode after you kill all the beneficials off. And that's a real thing. And I might have inadvertently observed that real thing on my farm this year. I'm not sure. So
question is though, which does more damage to your yield, the stink bugs or the aphids?
I would probably say aphids this year. In a normal year, maybe not. You could be really proactive and treat for both of them, and treat for both of them early enough that you protect your yield. But you got to be, I don't know that anybody's going to be willing to do that, because how many of you, let's be honest here, how many of you are looking for new things to spend money on next year? Nobody. You're trying to find what can I cut out that's not going to hurt my yield. Sadly, not much, because most things that you're doing now to produce this wonderful crop you're harvesting this year, the ROI is probably positive on, most of the individual things that you do. And if you're going to remain profitable, you need that 280, 290, 300 bushel corn. You need those 85, 90, 95 bushel beans. And you can't get to those yields skimping on crop protection products. And, unfortunately, we talk a lot about weed control on here. Weed control not getting any cheaper. A lot of you aren't satisfied completely with the level of weed control you've got this year. And the recommendations that I have for you to do better next year are going to cost more than what you did this year that you weren't happy with. Or in some cases, maybe we can just improve the timing of what you're doing, and what you're doing might be okay. We're just doing it at the wrong time, or doing it a little too late. And if we do it more timely, you might be more satisfied with what you've been doing. So in some cases, you maybe don't need to do more. You just need to do it a little differently. Some cases you need to do more and differently. And it kind of depends on, how much of an improvement you're wanting to make in your weed control. But, clean fields are expensive, and, fungicide's expensive, and seed's expensive, and fertilizer's expensive, and everything it takes to grow a good crop is expensive. And Adam and I aren't going to be able to change that reality. But it's still our job to make good recommendations to you on how to raise a good crop, and that's what we're going to do. So speaking of that, another thing you can spend money on, fall burn down. So do you remember? Let's go way back to February, March, April. You remember how committed you were then to, by God, I ain't going to look at this again. I'm doing fall burn down on every acre. You remember that guy? He used to be in your head, but he's gone now. Harvest is here. We are focused on other things. The field is pretty clean now. Not a chickweed in sight. No henbit. No mare's tail. No pennycress. No knee-high green crap that makes you feel bad. No muskrat huts behind your field cultivator where all these piles of residue are bunching up. Out of sight, out of mind, right? I don't need a fall burn down. It won't be that bad again. I'm not going to spend that money. I don't have time to do that. My spray guy doesn't want to do it. He's busy with anhydrous. Yeah. So every year this happens. So this is my reminder. You remember that guy back in the spring that was going to do this. find that guy again in the next month and get it done. Next 2 months and get it done. So there's when you're harvesting out there, there's probably, I haven't seen much yet, but we get one rain, there'll be a carpet of green stuff on the ground in your corn fields and in your bean fields. And what that is winter annuals. It'll be pennycress, it'll be chickweed, it'll be henbit, it'll be mare's tail, it'll be all that crap that, remember that pretty purple stuff? It's a itty bitty little green thing here in about 2 weeks. And then it'll be that pretty purple flower, and all the non-farm people that drive around the countryside in the spring. Oh, that's so pretty. Oh, that's so nice. I wonder what that is they planted out there.
My wife takes pictures, Lance.
Yes.
She wonders how soon that stuff's going to go away. She asked me those
questions. Yeah.
Are they going to kill that stuff?
Yeah. What a backdrop for a wedding photographer. Just a sea of violet. Pretty girl in a pretty dress and pretty purple in the background. Kill all that stuff, please. So anyway, what else? We talked about yield chasers. We talked about fall burn down, timeliness. So I think we've kind of touched on all the stuff I want to touch on here. So if you kind of the last thing I'll say is there's going to be some disappointments. There always are. We're going to raise the bar on what a disappointment is. So for example, I was talking to a guy the other day. His soybean, this is a dealer. His growers that have been harvesting soybeans, the field average yields of all the people he had talked to that had harvested beans in his area was ranging from 65 bushel to 85 bushel. And I think that's going to be a fairly common range. I've seen some 90 plus bushel field averages. There's probably going to be 100 out there somewhere, but the bottom end's probably going to be in the 60s. Corn, same way. There's, I know of at least 140 that average 302. Adam's got a plot high right now with 349. There's been lots of 310, 315 yield checks. There's been lots of individual hybrids in a plot that were over 300 bushel. But there's going to be a field somewhere that makes 210 or 190 or 200 or 215 or 225. Could be green snap, could be aphids. I was in a field last week that, it's not bad corn. It's probably 225 corn. But that's with 10% green snap and 10 to 15% plants that were severely affected by aphids. So between aphids and green snap, 20% of his ears are gone. Well, that's going to hurt. You can't make up for 20% missing ears. Now the 80% that's there, damn nice. Crop looks great. It's going to be good corn, but it ain't going to be 290 corn. And so there's going to be some disappointments. I wasn't really joking when I said I can't find the corn that's going to drag the Illinois average down to 227, because you need some 180 stuff to mix in with the 280 stuff to get down to 227. And I mean, I think the worst field average yield I've been told so far, now there'll be some patches in the timber that the deer ate half of it and the coons ate the other half, that makes like next to nothing. But there are enough acres of that to move the state average yield significantly. The worst legitimate field yield I've heard so far on corn was 225. And that guy was pretty sick about his 225 because he'd heard about 280 and 290, and he sees Adam's plots and, and he's farming. I mean, you couldn't buy this piece of dirt for $18,000 an acre. It's good ground, but it was 106-day corn, was not DeKalb. So as soon as I found that out, I thought, well, that answers that question. But it was an early hybrid having an off day. He was in a pocket that was extremely dry. There were places around Macomb that in June were almost as dry this year as they were last year. And that 106-day corn planted April 10th, it needed some rain before it got rain. So it did get dinged a little bit. So there's stuff out there that's not perfect. When the disappointing corn is 225 and the disappointing beans are 68, that's a pretty damn good year in my mind. But, our expectations, they get higher every year. And I get it. The economics of the situation we're in dictate your expectations need to be high if you're going to be profitable. But, it's in my line of work and Adam's line of work. When I started my career, I would have never expected to get an ass chewing over 250 bushel corn, but it's happened, because when you get a taste of 300 bushel corn, 250 don't feel as good as it used to. And the point I made to the dealer I was talking to about the 65 bushel beans, I said, that's, probably a 30 bushel range in soybean yields it's kind of what I'd call normal. It's easy to have a 30 bushel variation in yield across the field. Every good field of beans has got some spots making 70 and some spots making 100. And so there's your 30 bushel variation. So you're also going to have a 30 bushel variation across fields in your operation. And, and the yields today that get you ready to call up Adam and tell him you're switching to some other seed company because you're pissed. 15 years ago, that was the yield you were trying to get to. So we've changed pretty dramatically over the span of my career as far as what's good, what's bad, what's what you're excited about, what's your expectation. I mean, I work with growers that they count on raising 80 bushel beans, and they do it a lot. And to me, that's pretty remarkable to think that you could, I sell 60 some years before I even plant them. But, that's, we're getting more confident in our ability to raise good soybeans. We've always been confident in our ability to raise good corn. And sometimes you can't always get to, where you want to be to just because of factors that are going on. But it's going to be a good crop. I think there'll be a lot of you that have new farm average records. There will be a lot of new field. I've had many producers tell me already, whether a field made of beans was 78 or 88 or 96, it's the best that field's ever been. And I've had the same thing told to me on cornfields. Adam, you probably had the same thing. So, I don't know if nationally the crop is going to exceed expectations or not. I don't even know if statewide it's going to exceed expectations, but it is really, really, really good. And I hope it's really, really good for you. And I hope you all stay safe. When's the next episode, Adam? It'll be 2 weeks.
October 3rd.
October 3rd. I'm wanting some October weather. I don't know about you, Adam, but I'm getting tired of these 90-degree afternoons.
Yeah, I got a good one. You talking about expectations there. There's a good customer, good farmer, good friend of mine that we always joke, about how when you get the bag of seed corn, there's supposedly 600 bushel worth of potential, right? Right. And he told me this year. He says, "Well, buddy," he says, "we only screwed up half of it this year."
yeah, that's good. Yeah. You usually you're not getting not even getting half of the yield potential that's in theory in the bag, and this year some of you actually going to get half of it. So good job. So anyway, we'll go ahead and sign off here. We all got things to do. Appreciate you joining here this morning. It's been fun. We'll be back with you in 2 weeks on October 3rd, right, Adam? Is that what you said? October 3rd. So nice to think about some cool fall. Fall is my favorite time of year. It's it's usually pretty comfortable out, and it's nice that we're cooling off at night. I told Adam it's kind of like with these low humidity days we've been having. It's kind of like being in the desert. It gets too hot in the day, but it does cool off nice at night. So. Anyway, stay safe. Hopefully your harvest goes well. If you see something fascinating, call your rep, call me, call somebody. Let them know what you're seeing, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Thanks.